You're listening to the B&H Photography Podcast. For over 40 years, B&H has been the professional source for photography, video, audio, and more. For your favorite gear, news, and reviews, visit us at bnh.com or download the B&H app to your iPhone or Android device. Now here's your host, Alan Weitz.
Greetings and welcome to the B&H Photography Podcast. My name is Alan Weitz.
And I'm John Harris.
And today we'll be talking about a powerful project that truly understands and effectively utilizes the relationship between content and form. The project is called Facing Life, which at its heart is a series of portraits of people recently released from life sentences in California prisons. And while there is text and even 360-degree video involved, the primary form used to tell these stories is called a cinemagraph. And we're going to learn about this medium as well as the project itself from its creators, Brandon Tauszik and Pendarvis Harshaw, also known as Pen.
Hey there, thanks for having us.
Hello.
Pleasure to have you guys here. Now, let's get a little bit more specific. Brandon Tauszik is a photographer and filmmaker based in Los Angeles, California. His long-term projects examine elements of America's social periphery, often with the use of a medium known as cinemagraphs. These projects, such as Tapered Throne and Syria Street, push the boundaries of digital photography. Tausik's work has received reviews from the Washington Post, Time, Vice, Fisheye magazine, and he has been commissioned by the San Francisco Chronicle and International Committee of the Red Cross. Pendarvis Harshaw is a journalist, author, educator, and a staff writer and podcast producer at KQED in San Francisco. He's taught journalism to high school students as well as incarcerated men. His first book, OG Told Me, is a memoir-style collection of essays about his coming-of-age experience as a Black man in America. Welcome, Brandon, and welcome, Penn, once again. We're looking forward to this show today.
So are we. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
And we also encourage our listeners to check out our homepage or the Facing Life website, both linked in the show notes, to get a sense of this incredible work. And we're going to start off, and I'm going to throw this out to either one of you, whoever wants to grab it. Tell us a bit about this project. It's very, very unique. How did it start? What was the genesis of this project?
Yeah, I'll take the lead. So I was the writer on this. Brandon was the photographer, the visual person. And we came together. We've known each other for some time through artistic circles in Oakland. We wanted to do a project that really spoke to something significant happening in society. I've been working in prisons for some time, both through the San Quentin News, which is a newspaper out of San Quentin, and through another prison in Vacaville called California Medical Facility, where I taught writing. And just having some understanding of what's happening in California's prison system, knowing that we're at ground zero of a very big story. This is something that impacts a lot of different aspects of society. And it's somewhat overlooked because it's prisons and, it's off to the side, out of sight, out of mind. And knowing that, we wanted to put some light on it, and specifically how in California, the state is trying to deal with the overpopulation within the prisons by changing laws, releasing people who've served mass amounts of time. And our question was, who's there to assist these people as the rubber meets the road, assist them as they face life anew. And with Brandon's assistance and the backing of the Pulitzer Center, we produced this project that highlights 8 individuals all throughout the state who've done massive amounts of time and are now looking to reintegrate into society. And they're facing hurdles and facing life,
And can I ask you, Penn, this is John, was the change in California's laws kind of the impetus? Is that what started this? Or was this something that you wanted to work on for a while and you saw the changes that were happening and said, now's the time?
Just being in circles of people who do this type of work, talking to them about, what's significant happening in California's prison system. So the changing of laws, to me, be more direct, in 2011, there was a Supreme Court case, Brown v. Plata, in which it was ruled that the overcrowding within California's prison systems was bringing about medical conditions which were an infringement on people's Eighth Amendment. And so thereafter, you started to see a number of bills change in terms of how sentencing happens for youth, people 25 and under. And of course, once those laws changed, that also impacted people who were already sentenced and serving that time. And so people started to see a window, an opportunity to appeal to the board
Now, is this before, if I may interject, is this before COVID hit, or is this in conjunction with COVID? Because I know, if I'm not mistaken, the prison rate was something like 199% capacity or something like that.
Yeah, yeah. At one point in 2006, I believe,
Oh, okay.
that was
But
the height of it. And so, and then once the Supreme Court case happens, it's mandatory that California gets its population down to 137.5, which it lingered at until COVID hit. And then once COVID hit, the prison population dropped even lower to about 102% capacity.
gotcha. And I think it's also important to understand that, a lot of, first of all, I went through the whole series, and I found it to be truly fascinating. Truth of the matter is, all of these people really did commit the crimes that they were incarcerated for. But it's very interesting to read about, how they came about and how they've changed. And it sounds quite sincere, and it sounds very, very real. And I think it's also important to add that not everybody's story ended well, because not everybody can adapt to life of freedom, quote unquote, after being incarcerated and being subject to a whole different kind of culture and way of life.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And I think that was very, I mean, Brandon, you can speak to it, but the aim was to talk to people, not the superstars, not the people who have these drastic horror stories, but kind of middle of the road, everyday individuals who just experience this system and again are at ground zero. And yeah, Brandon, how would you speak to that part of it?
Yeah, I mean, the interesting aspect, about lifers and why the state of California decided to, over the course of many years, release so many lifers is a very stable population. Their recidivism rate compared to people that do 2 to 5 years, that's, around 50+%. Their recidivism rate for lifers hovers around 1%. So around 1% of lifers released return to prison, which is incredibly low. So the issue really isn't their return to prison. It's, transitioning them smoothly into society. So none of them went back to prison. All of them are doing well overall. They're just struggling socioeconomically, entering a rapidly automating workforce, basically as, tech illiterate. And California is an extremely expensive state, and everything from housing to a dozen eggs is way overpriced, and they're kind of coming out into that. And physically, they're reaching middle to late stage of their lives, and so a lot of the work that they can get or that they receive training for while incarcerated, blue collar, manual labor type of work. So they're hitting the ground running, but then facing these realities of an aging body, bulging disc in your back. You can't really do that work for much longer anymore, if at all.
I do want to get to some of the questions about the decisions to use Cinemagraph and the other forums you took to tell these stories. But can you give us an idea of how you found the subjects, the people that you ended up photographing, and whose stories you're telling? And were there some folks that you were working with and it just didn't work out, so that they weren't included in this project?
Yeah, yeah. One of my favorite lessons from journalism school is find them, just straight find that person. And you're kind of on a mission where you're doing everything short of posting posters on on street poles. We sent emails, phone calls, showed up at meetings. We went to like parole board meetings and met with judges. We talked to people all up and down the chain, lawyers, advocacy groups. Um, Brandon was there when one of the individuals was actually being released the very day of. I talked to, I mean, growing up in the community I grew up in, I talked to people who were around me who were impacted by the prison system and seeing if they had family members who were being released, because this is something that's impacting us all. So it wasn't that hard to at least get the conversation going. But honing in on the 8 individuals that we did, each individual has a different story and how we found them and how we ended up staying in contact with them. There were definitely people who we found, who we had multiple conversations with, who added to our knowledge of what was happening, but weren't specifically highlighted in this story.
And would you say that people in general that you approached were interested in telling their story or being a part of the project, or was there a lot of no's?
I remember at least 1 or 2 no's. Yeah, for different reasons. But now that it's out, it's the most gratifying thing in the world for the 8 individuals who highlighted, one of which was passed. but even his family uh, has contacted us, and all of them are just like, "Thank you, thank you for allowing us to be seen." And even I've even had conversations with other individuals who've been in this kind of situation, formerly incarcerated, served large amounts of time, not necessarily life, but people have reached out to us and been like, thank you for telling this story. So yeah, that's reassuring.
And as a journalist, as it were, or filmmaker, artist, photographer, how did you explain the project? How did you? I mean, was there convincing involved? Was there some? How did you kind of use your skills as a journalist, as a photographer, to kind of bring people into this with kind of the focus and the type of interest that you wanted them to have?
Hey, Brendan, how many times did you tell people this is not a documentary?
Oh yeah, they're like, well, yeah, well, your film. When's the film coming out?
Right.
Like, it's not a film; it's a digital documentary project. It's multimedia. It's got text. They're like, yeah, but when's the movie coming out?
Right, my family wants to see the movie. When is the movie dropping? So it wasn't hard to do that first interview. A lot of people were down. Really, it's wow. I mean, to think you serve 30 years behind bars, you get out and there's two kids in front of you. Kids or not kids, two young men in front of you who with cameras and saying, "Hey, tell me everything about your life. I want to put it on tape."
And we were very straight up, from the interview process on. We're like, hey, like, we're going to be working on this for a long time. Just be a part of your life, and be with you as you navigate this transition. So they all 8 that participated in the project were down for that. And over the years, we grew super close with all 8 of them.
You bring up an interesting point about we're going to be living with you for a while, because again, this isn't like just doing a magazine piece where you spend a few hours, you take notes and pictures, and you're gone the next day or in the weekend. It's out in the papers. This is something where you said, no, we're going to be with you. We're going to get to know you. We're going to be living with you in a certain sense and become extended family. Did you have a maximum time in mind, or were you just going to let this go for a while? Because, I mean, how do you figure out when it's over? How'd you do that?
Well, I mean, we had a goal of like a year and a half, and we definitely shortchanged ourselves. It took some time to really get into it and understand the magnitude of the situation and tell the story. And the pandemic definitely hit and extended this project. And we had to pivot and, of course, incorporate that because that changes the whole story. And we were done with it in late fall of last year, and it didn't come out until this year. Um, just just a month ago, like pretty much. It's wild to think.
So my question is now, did it end organically? Did you know inside of you said, okay, no, this is good. This is a good place to end, or did it depend on the subjects? Because I imagine some people came to that point of evolution and it was clear. And some people, I imagine, are still, well, everyone's still evolving, but some people might not have actually found their niche yet. Did everyone have an organic ending, each of these stories, or some of them did you walk away from saying, there might have been more there? I think there's more there.
I mean, we could just keep going.
Always more there. Yeah, always more there for sure. And yeah, there's no sweet tight ribbon that you just put on a story, like ever. Always stories continue. Always, forever. Even the Jose who passed, RP, through his story, his daughter's story now becomes even more interesting, right?
Did you do some of these concurrently? I mean, were you working with different folks at the same time, or did you kind of space them out in a way that it was one-on-one, or one person at a time?
No, we did this all at the same time. Yeah, all at the same time.
And did any of these people know each other?
Yes.
Yeah. It actually, the California prison system, I try to explain it to people. It's kind of like a university system. I don't know. like people know each other from different schools, and people get shipped around from spot to spot so much, and different organizations, different involvement. Yeah, people know of each other, especially in women's networks because it's tighter knit.
When you are doing it with people concurrently, I mean, how did let's say, your questions evolve and change, or the way that you approached having had spoken with somebody one day and the next day you're talking to somebody else? I mean, did they kind of bleed into one another in terms of the themes that were being addressed and the questions you were asking?
Yeah, I mean, we're constantly being informed as we made the work. Compared to from now to 2018, like we knew nothing. So every venture out with someone, every interview, every photo shoot, every meal shared, we learned, and the project evolved, and the scope of the project evolved. And it's a California story. So back to how we selected our participants, we needed people from northern, central, and southern. We needed men and women. We needed different ethnicities. So it was kind of a Venn diagram that ended up having us, doing 4-hour drives to the Central Valley, and then next week in the Bay, and then a few months later, Penn would fly down to LA. So, it was a lot of zigzagging.
Yeah, and I will say this: your question made me think of after interviews or after just experiences, conversations. Sometimes there would just be a phone call. Brandon and I would just exchange a text or kind of debrief, in some way. And as we were doing this reporting, we came to the realization that there's this kind of each one reach one, again back to the network of formerly incarcerated, specifically lifers, who are assisting each other to get back on their feet. Say if I served time, I knew you, I got out 4 years ahead of you. When you get out, you hit me, and I just say, hey, these are the organizations that have helped me, or this is the church I go to, this is the people that I know.
Were you guys always together when you were conducting your interviews and conversations and making the images, or did you at times work separately?
Yes,
we worked separately. Yeah,
we worked together for the big interviews. So we did it was like 3 main interviews with each individual.
Yep.
And then every once in a while, Brandon would meet up with somebody, or I'd meet up with somebody, or I'd have a phone call. Yeah, so we tag team.
I think what's interesting also is that these stories are told through the use of cinemagraphs, which for those listeners who are not familiar with it, a cinemagraph in a nutshell, it's a still image to which motion is added, usually very subtle. So if it's a person, maybe their hair would be blowing, where you'd see them wink, or smoke coming out of a cigarette or a cup of coffee or something like that. And I have to admit that when I first saw that word used in this project, again, cinemagraphs are I think it's a fascinating technology. It's very easy to make this into a Hallmark greeting card. And I was wondering how this was going to be used. And I have to say that I found each of them to be very powerful and really done well. And as you scroll down the website to look at each of these people's stories, it works very well. The images are good. They're wonderful images. And that little touch of movement adds just a little bit of just the right touch to it. And then you read the story, and it all starts to make sense.
Was Cinemagraph always going to be a part of this?
Yeah. So I got into Cinemagraphs, which really at the heart of a Cinemagraph is a loop, and at the genesis of the Cinemagraph is the GIF, the .gif file format. So I guess to take it back, that the GIF came out in around 1987, back when the internet was way too slow to stream video, pre-YouTube. GIFs would be a way to animate a point or a visual on the internet with the bandwidth speeds being so low. And then it kind of went through like Web 1.0 and GeoCities through the 90s as a way to add flair to your terrible website. And then it kind of died off. And then it kind of came back around 2010 with Tumblr, Giphy. And, we now had a faster internet that could support huge GIFs. And so it really became kind of a memified cultural communication format. Recycling movies, TV shows, sharing, texting, and again, back to Tumblr and Giphy. So I got onto Tumblr around 2010. I love GIFs. I was sharing GIFs, but as someone that's always worked in both photography and filmmaking, I saw potential there for digital storytelling that I hadn't really seen anywhere else.
Yeah, and I mean that clearly, I've I've rarely seen anybody use it as well as you have, and that goes back to some of the projects that I saw that you did, like in 2017 and earlier. So for this, though, you knew that this was kind of the medium that you wanted to focus on, because there are video, and of course there's text, but in your mind, Cinemagraph was kind of the heart of it.
Yeah. The first like longer term project I used it with, started around 2011 and came out in 2015. That was Tapered Throne, profiling barbers in Oakland. After that, a commission from the ICRC, Sirius Street in 2017, also kind of built into a website, a digital platform with text, with sound, but the visuals are primarily the cinemagraphs. So then when this came about the following year in 2018, I knew that I wanted to do kind of the same thing, but just, plus it up a little bit.
And Penn, were you familiar with the format? I mean, what did you think about it at the beginning?
Yeah. I definitely had seen his previous work, was a fan of it, was excited to do it. I definitely thought, like, as you said, it was applicable to what we were talking about. Even more so, like, it serves the purpose just in itself, where the purpose of this project is we're asking people to, yes, like, change the prison system and, hire formerly incarcerated people and all these big, like, societal questions, but also just, like, take some time as an individual to look at another individual. Just, like, do that. And the cinemagraphs allow you to do that.
Yeah. Maybe we could talk a little bit about then how you make them. I mean, in terms of, most of our listeners are still photographers. Can you kind of describe the capture process? Is it much different? And we'll get into this a little more detail, but can you start with the general basics of it, Brandon?
Yeah, so they're sourced from video. So it's all slow motion video that then is brought into a mixture of Adobe Premiere and primarily After Effects, where a loop is found, created, masks are made to hide aspects that shouldn't be moving or that need to be looping at a different time. And yeah, the post is quite complex, but at the end of the day, it's sourced from video footage.
And the video footage is, kind of a typical. How long would the clip be? Do you set up the shot in a way that any different way than you might a standard video shot or even a still photo?
Oh yeah. I mean, it's process wise similar maybe to large format portrait photography, where you have to pick a location. Your shutter speed is long, so you need good light. You need to kind of pose and make sure that your participant, your subject, is in line with what you need. So there's an explaining process involved, and then you need to find an action that's honest to the subject, but that will loop well as a GIF. Sometimes it doesn't work. Sometimes I make one and then I bring it back into After Effects, and I'm just like, this is, like you said with the hallmark effect. There's a fine line with cinemagraphs between subtlety and corniness, and something
Yeah.
that feels real, a moment that feels genuine, and then something that's just taken too far.
Yeah. And did it take a lot of direction of the subjects? I mean, in the terms of the movements that you might have wanted, and what what they were willing to do or able to do?
Yeah. Definitely takes a lot of direction. There's some in the project like Fahim using a saw, going back and forth with the saw. I'm like, okay, but you need to do it slower. You need to do this. Okay, and he, participants were very, very patient with that, even though I don't think there was initially like a total understanding of what I was trying to do. I would try to show, pull up Tapered Throne and be like, okay, we're going to make a photograph, but it's not a photograph, but it's not video. And they're like, okay, cool.
Something that crosses my mind, and I have this whole. I'm listening to you describe what's going on, and I'm trying to put myself in the position of somebody who just came out of incarceration, and the reality that these people have lived with, and their day-to-day routines and concerns and fears and whatever it is, everything about life. And then we're talking about creating cinemagraphs and artwork and stuff like that. And I have to imagine that some of these people kind of looked at you at times and just saying, Why don't you want? It's how did anybody not really get it and just look at you as if to say, "What is this nonsense about?"
Yeah, I'd say Myra, love her, and we're super close now. But at the beginning, she was like, "You took my picture last time. Why do you need to do it again? Like, we're done." And I'm like, "No, sorry. Now we need to like photograph you working, or now we need to do one of you at home, or you just bought your first car, so we need to photograph you changing the oil, or So yeah,
No.
And you have
Like,
to
hold on, wait,
imagine that to
sorry,
these.
wait. Can I stop you real quick? Jump in. Like from a third party perspective, and watching Brandon and Myra's interaction, it's fascinating. Where Myra is this like Myra's a spark plug, just a great energy, a great story. Like a horrible, like has done some horrible things in the past, has healed from them, has grown, like has been through some horrible things herself. And when we first met Myra, I was the first one to interact with her, and she wasn't down for even like sitting across the table and talking to men. Period. And so we grabbed tacos, we hit it off, and she was open to talking to me. And then I introduced Brandon, and she was like, "Who's this guy?" And she more or less like lovingly picked on him the whole time. And Brandon is hella assertive when he's a photographer, when he's in photography mode. He knows exactly what he wants, and he's rugged about it, you know? And so like seeing their back and forth, it was very fascinating. And they are, yeah, Brandon brought her a gift back from like his international travels, and they're sweet.
That's great. Is that true, Brendan? Are you different personality when you have the camera with you?
yeah, especially when making a cinemagraph. It's not like stills where you can just bump off 50 and then one's going to work. Like it's very specific, and if I'm not able to get what I know I need to get, then it's not going to work, and there's no point in me even having shown up that day. So it can get a little stressful when people are like, "All right, we're done," like, or "I gotta go." It's like, no, well, I'm pretty sure we don't have the right action required yet. Sorry.
Maybe we could talk a little bit about the post process, and not necessarily the specifics of it, but I'm curious how you envision what you're photographing in the capture process, and how then you can kind of see it in your mind's eye in the post process. I mean, are you analyzing the frame completely and knowing, okay, that movement of the tree in the background is going to be perfect, or I'm going to have to get rid of that, and how again, how long is that process? I know it's a long one, but can you kind of talk about how long it would take, and the steps of creating these final images?
Yeah, it's very, there's a lot of minutia, and depending on the image, it can take at least a couple days straight of just sitting in After Effects and post-production work. Um, Maybe one of Jose, where he's at a grill. That was kind of an example of kind of a complex one. He's got a family member that's watching him in the foreground, and then he's at a grill with fire and carne asada in kind of center stage in the background, and then I'm off camera holding a bounce board because I was alone, and the bounce is hitting his face, but I'm trying to keep it consistent. So I knew that ideally the goal with that one was to have him kind of standing at the grill and then a loop of the flames, but it was really difficult because fire is fire, and it would go high and then it would go low, and you want to hide that loop point so it feels like an entirely organic, seamless moment. But it was really difficult. There were cars passing in the background. It worked out, but yeah, it can be complex.
I actually really like that one. I'm looking at it now, and at that moment when he kind of blinks his eye, it really, I don't know, it brings you in. I mean, is that to you what is special about the Cinemagraph? I mean, and we talked a little bit about the novelty aspect of it, but is it this element that forces people to kind of linger just that little bit longer to then dig in deeper to the story?
Yeah, to connect with the subject, connect with the human that's in front of them. It's a hybrid medium between photography and filmmaking. So it's sourced from video, but it's a still moment like a photo. It's durational like video, but then it loops, like it doesn't end. So you can ideally get kind of caught in the moment. We're all scrolling so quick past images on Instagram and everything. So the goal is to just kind of like slow you down a little bit, get you lost in that moment.
And you don't think a still portrait would provide the same effect necessarily, may not the same effect, but it would provide ultimately the same goal or reach the same goal, which is, telling this person's story?
It totally can. And I love portrait photography, of course. And at heart, I'm a photographer and I'm a photography fan. But JPEGs are great and I have a lot of photo books, but I make work that lives on the internet. So I figure, why not take advantage of all the opportunities to display work on the internet and plus it,
All right, we're going to take a short break. When we come back, more with Brandon Tauszik and Penn Harshaw and prison reform and cinemagraphs. Stay tuned.
We hope you're enjoying this edition of the B&H Photography Podcast. The best way to support the show is by subscribing on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. For links to gear and more information on today's guests, check out the show notes in your podcast app or visit our homepage on the B&H Explorer website and join the B&H Photography Podcast Facebook group. And now, back to the show.
Okay, we are back with Brandon Tauszik and Penn Harshaw and their project Facing Life. By the way, if you'd like to follow along and see some of these images as we're speaking, you could view it at www.facing.life. And again, we strongly urge you to take a look at. The whole project is quite interesting. So here's a question about, we were talking about cinemagraphs, but what's important to when making a portrait? Is it the interaction, direction on it? How do you go about this? And does the medium affect any of this that you're working in?
Yeah, I mean, I think interaction, direction, honesty, it's a Venn diagram of all three. Similar to any sort of formal portraiture like Dawood Bey or anything like that, it's going to be staged, but it should also be honest to that person. It should be in a place where that person exists, either their work or their home or their childhood home. And it should be honest to their life. Something, if it's an action, something that's ideally part of their everyday life.
And was there ever a thought to, perhaps do this portrait or one of the portraits out of, the context of their home and their lives? I mean, because you have 360 video and you have other aspects that perhaps could show their homes, their family homes, and then the portrait itself would have been done separately in a way that, many portraits are, obviously, to kind of hone in on the subject separate from their environment, or was that never even part of the conversation?
Yeah, I mean, one of Melvin's is him just eating lunch at a diner down the street from his house. Mm-hmm. It doesn't have to necessarily be tied to, location-wise tied to their lives 100%, but just, something that you would normally be doing, which usually would be informed with a conversation, like, what are you up to? Or like, where are you working? Or what's your, you work graveyard shift. What's your commute like? Do you ride the bus? Like, let's do this, so.
But a studio or, a uniform location for each of them was really never part of the conversation?
No, I'm not a big fan of ingesting or creating kind of studio-based portraiture photography.
What was the level of collaboration? It sounds like in some cases, people were really involved and said, hey, let's go shoot over here, or here's a place that's important to me. Was that kind of typical for each of the interviews, for each of the subjects?
Yeah, I mean, I think, with my background coming, half filmmaking and then also, half my work being in photography, when doing documentary filmmaking, it's all a collaboration, and it's extremely collaborative. So like this process, and then with photography or per se photojournalism, that's kind of pulled out of the process and you're just like, a ghost on the wall. So, I prefer kind of like that documentary approach of collaborating and finding something that works and having a dialogue of, how do you want to be presented? Do you want to include your father? Do you want to include your cousin? Or do you want to just be you, But yeah, it definitely very collaborative in the sense, again, that this is a very fickle medium with a lot of minutia. And, if there's no element that works to have a purpose for the movement or the loop, then it's not really a successful image. It's not a successful cinematograph. So yeah.
Now, each of these people went through some pretty traumatic things and experiences that most of us will never even imagine, let alone experience. Did you go back to any places with any of these individuals and all of a sudden you realized that something was going dark on them, that this was bringing back bad experiences or bad memories, and that they had to just say, I can't be here, I got to go? Anything like that? Or expressions that were extremely telling because something was coming back from the past?
I think going back to Melvin's story, so his co-defendant was his father, and he actually did time with his father, and for a while was cellmates with his father, which was something that caused him a great deal of emotion, of anger, of frustration, and they released, within around a year or two of each other. But since they were both on parole, when you're on parole, you cannot be, within a certain distance of your co-defendant. So they technically couldn't see each other. So that was something that, we had to navigate in his relationship with his father, because his father is such an integral part of his story. But their relationship is complex. And for half the project, they technically couldn't be together. So, that was, yeah.
That's interesting, and also incredibly horrible. I don't mean it in a light way, but the fact that you can be in prison with somebody, incarcerated with somebody, and then when you're out, not able to see them.
I'm thinking about that.
Strange
Yeah.
He told Pendarvis in an interview, he was embarrassed to be incarcerated with his father, that his father was his co-defendant.
Right, I can imagine. That's
Stuff.
tough. That's tricky. Yeah. Jumping back to some of the formal elements, I mean, on the website, facing life, facing.life, it's incredible. I mean, it really, and we'll talk a bit more about this, how this website really keeps you in and brings you to these stories. But one of the elements you use is 360-degree video, which is something I don't think I've ever seen in this type of work, for that matter. But it does really give you a sense of the day-to-day life of the folks whose stories you're telling. How'd you come up with that idea, and why? And what was kind of the decision to say, all right, let's go for it?
I from the outset, I did want to include it somehow. I wasn't really sure how we would end up doing that, but it was a medium that was kind of coming to light around the time, 2017, 18, around the time that we started the project. And again, like Cinemagraphs, it's a digital medium that lives online. Our project, I knew, was going to live online. It was never going to be a photo book. So with we want the project to be deep if you want to go deep, but also bite size if you want to, you're scrolling at the pace of social media. So we have, like, some of Penn's text, the important parts are highlighted in larger text. The videos are short, around 60 seconds, and if you skip them, that's fine. You're still going to get the meat and potatoes of the story. So we wanted to create a kind of multi-sensory, very immersive first-person experience, but also keep it magazine style, keep it short and sweet.
And do you think that the 360 element brings something specific to this stories or this project that maybe another medium wouldn't, or even a panoramic photo, which you could put online as well?
Yeah, I mean, it gives control and authorship to the viewer to decide how they want to navigate a certain scene, and all the scenes are just very everyday, honest. Lynn getting in her new car and playing rap music that you didn't think she would be listening to. Jose at a family barbecue with his cousins while Drake plays. And you can scroll over to the grill, or you can scroll over to his cousins, or you can look down at the Salsa Verde. Just get a sense for the sights and the sounds and the textures of life for these people.
And you mentioned about the website and how there are bite-sized aspects to it, and things are brief. And again, you can go deeper into these things, but there certainly is some charm about how succinct these stories or these separate depictions of the stories are, and it really is welcoming. Is this something that was there from the get-go, at least in your guys' mind, or is this something that kind of developed as you went along?
I think Penn can speak to that. The process of taking 3 years of interactions and interviews and reducing it to, a handful of paragraphs.
Yeah, it's not easy. That's it. That's the answer. No, I mean, you're trying to, in a lot of ways, highlight someone's early childhood, their experiences while incarcerated, and their life now that they're getting back on their feet, and put it into a piece that can be read in less than 5 minutes, and it's tough to condense. You leave a lot on the editing floor, and this is something that we knew we had to do. We worked with a great editor, and a couple of great editors, and really just got this piece to a spot where we felt like, all right, now it's digestible, because we wanted to be able to be both journalism and art, and beyond that, a teaching tool.
And did you have any, specific audience in mind, even if it was kind of a quiet voice in the back of your head as who you really wanted this to appeal to?
Yeah. First and foremost, stakeholders, people who have the power to change the way the laws impact the people. Secondly, the people, specifically those in hiring positions or in education positions, to look at people who've been impacted by the justice system and say, like, this individual needs a fair shot in terms of, climbing the ladders of society. And then formerly incarcerated people, specifically, like people reflected in this story. We wanted to make sure that they are seen and understood, and can create further dialogue around the issues impacting them.
And you'd mentioned, Brandon, that this was always supposed to be, or at least in your mind, it was going to be a web-based project. The final product was going to be somewhat interactive in that sense. Is this the final version of what you guys have? Is this project going to grow? Will there be other aspects of it, other ways of demonstrating it, or I should say, other ways of exhibiting it?
Yeah, so we're currently in the process of securing more funding, more grant funding to take it out in real life. So we are hoping to do kind of a short California tour with the work, and then kind of host community conversations, bring our participants out, and also bring out organizations that we've worked with along the way, like Uncommon Law, Sentencing Project, Anti-Recidivism Coalition, so that it can bring it to a wider audience.
With the people who participated, would they be interested in continuing this? Like, say you're talking about going on and having a traveling show, quote unquote, going around. Would the people who you photographed and documented, would they be included in this? Did they want to be included in this? What's the relationship moving forward?
100%. Yeah, we're in close communication with basically all of them, and they've been on radio segments with us already since the project has come out. They've been interviewed in press articles about the project. They're very excited to share their story and to kind of help inform the general public as to their experience.
How has their outlook on things changed? Could you speak about that at all? I mean, as far as the way they view society, the way they view the world around them. I mean, how does one's perspective change when you've been incarcerated for so long and you come out in the world that is totally alien, and but you're no longer invisible. You actually you do have a spotlight on you. How are they responding to that?
All right, so I wouldn't say, no one's invisible. These people are visible. They live, they exist, and I think it was on us just to amplify their stories. And that's as journalists, like that's what it's about. And not only amplify it to say, hey, y'all, check out this spectacle, but to amplify it and provide context and say, this is why I think it needs to be amplified, because this is a story that impacts you. You as a person who lives in California and knows that this country, but specifically this state, is heading toward a mandate to meet clean energy innovation. These are the people that are installing clean energy panels. So meet them. Or you as a person who's interested in science and studying the development of the child brain, talk to this person, because this person was judged as an adult at 17 for something they did. so like it was on us to amplify it and provide context, but make them visible or make them be seen as people. Like, no, they're people. They've been people. But yeah, it's just that's what a journalist should do. That's what journalism should do. And oftentimes we overlook, like, I try to tell people, especially like journalism students that I talk to, like if an asteroid hit outside of my house, I would say, oh shit, this is a story, and I mean Cinemagraph or not, like this is a story, right? But for me to look at an everyday person walking down my street and say this is an asteroid hitting in front of my house, I need to see them as such, and I need to tell the world why this is an asteroid, why this is important. And so yeah, that is the role of the journalist.
Ben, quick question: did you pick up a camera at all during this time, or
yeah,
is it?
yeah, funny. Yeah, I mean, I'm a multimedia journalist. I went to school for like documentary film and everything. And so,
okay. All right.
So yeah, I did. Obviously not as pretty as Brendan's work. But I'm laughing because I just looked through like an old phone that I had with me, and so I have a whole bunch of behind the scenes shots. I'll probably post them. A little throwback Thursday. But yeah, I did, and I mean, you kind of have to. It's something. It was a ride. It was an adventure.
Yeah, and he did all the video interviews. He did. I'd set up the camera and then just kind of go hide in the corner.
And is that kind of how you divided some of the workload? I mean, in maybe, and again, tell me if I'm wrong, but Brandon doing some of the tech and the photo side, and you getting involved with and Penn doing the interviews and of course the writing. But when you guys were together working, did you have a kind of a workflow or a division of labor that worked out pretty well?
Yeah, I mean, journalists and visuals. It was such an immense pleasure to work with Penn on this project. My previous long-term photo projects, I've just been alone and kind of wrestling with the visual component, but also the politics or the history of a subject matter and trying to incorporate that, but all alone. So I knew. Both Penn and I separately had known of each other's work, but we did want to make work around mass incarceration. It's just such a huge societal issue. I didn't feel I was, equipped as a visual artist to tackle such a complex and nuanced issue alone. So it was just such a pleasure to have Penn along for the ride, and he could do that complex work.
Right. No, we supported each other, and it helped having background. So me having like some knowledge of as a photographer, I could say, "Hey, Brendan, check out this framing." I double check that, or Brendan can check me on the typo because he knows how to read and write as well.
Yeah, very collaborative.
So you had funding from the Pulitzer Center for this. Can you talk about that a bit? Did that funding come up before you started the project? I mean, did you write grants to get this funding and then start, or were you already in the middle of it when some of the funding came along and that just boosted it?
I mean, like I said, Penn and I had been wanting to collaborate on something for a long time, just having known of each other's work in Oakland. The Pulitzer Center was receiving proposals for work around mass incarceration. They received a large endowment to fund work that discussed mass incarceration in the United States. So we pitched this project, and they approved it, and we began it then.
So maybe a big broad question that comes often at the end of interviews. But what did you guys learn from doing this, or what surprised you? I mean, what did you? Any opinion changes? Any thoughts on what you might do next based on this project, and what came out of it? What's coming out of it for you guys?
And what
right
was
now?
unexpected?
Yeah.
What surprises did you get along the way, if any?
Okay, so I think there's an external answer and there's an internal answer. Internally, like that's pretty straight and narrow. Like you said, got backing from like the what is that? I don't even say it right. The Pulitzer Center, Pulitzer, whatever. Like you get funding from the Pulitzer Center, and that's a big name to have behind your work. And me, I've done work. I've done some work, but nothing of this magnitude. And to see a byline in the LA Times come of this, to see a piece in the Guardian come from this, just so many different journalists and educators kind of praising this work, to know that this is the fruit of our labor is humbling, is gratifying, but also it's like, okay, I understand what chair I'm in now. I understand the power of my work, and what I can do moving forward. And so for a lot of time, that 3.5 years, there was a lot of imposter syndrome where I'm at the kitchen table and I'm like, I think this is going to be shareable to the world. But to have it out definitely is reassuring and bolster my confidence. So that's internal. External, I think the lessons keep coming. Yeah, there's a lot. It's journalism is spiritual work. It's very spiritual. And so, yeah, the aspect of jumping into somebody's world and telling their story and then realizing you can't just walk out of their world. You're going to be in contact with them or you're going to learn more about their story. Yeah, there's a continuum to the education process externally. I'll say that.
Yeah, to get to experience someone else's reality is just part of the gift of creating documentary work. It's complex, beautiful.
Wonderful.
Okay, that's a wrap of another show. Brandon Tauszik and Penn Harshaw, pleasure speaking with you both. A wonderful project. I got the notes of it originally and started looking at it and just fell in love with the entire project as I was going along with it. It's well done. It's well produced. It's a beautiful series. And I really urge all of our listeners to check it out. And speaking of which, if our listeners want to see more of this work, this project and others, where are some of the websites and links that they can go to?
Sure, you can find the whole project at facing.life. And that's the main spot where the stories are. And from there, myself, you can find me on Twitter at OGPenn, OGPENN, Twitter and Instagram. And then Brandon, you can share your info.
Yeah, on Instagram and Twitter, bdizzle, BE_DIZZLE.
And all of this will be in our show notes, by the way. So if you didn't jot it down with your crayon, don't worry about that. It's all there.
Is this still taking up most of your, your professional quote unquote life? Are you working on other projects? What's next?
Ben?
Yeah, I mean, spreading the good news, doing workshops, like looking forward to taking this into classrooms and real life off the computer. So this project is definitely hot on the stove, but also juggling. I host a podcast called Right Nowish out of KQED, which is all about arts and culture in the Bay Area. And then I also write a column for KQED. And beyond that, yeah, we have our own lives. So there's a lot to be done.
How often is your podcast broadcast?
It drops once a week, every Friday morning. It's on all platforms. And then there's a shorter radio version that plays on 94.1 FM in the Bay Area.
Got to check that out. Definitely do. Sounds good.
And Brandon, same question kind of, because, you do all kinds of work. Just to let people know, to take a look at your website. The still photography work, the journalism work, the documentary work, it's all well worth taking a look at. But
Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah. Any other projects you're working on?
Yeah, I think I really want to focus for the rest of the year in really distributing this project correctly, and like we mentioned earlier, bringing it into an exhibition space around California, and then also the Pulitzer Center has an education wing, so they're going to send us to journalism schools in the fall to present it. We're really excited about that, and beyond that, just kind of like loosening up a little bit, directing some narrative short films for my friend Nada Alec, a writer. So just kind of, little palate cleanser there. And then, all sorts of things. A lot of irons in the fire.
Sounds good. Sounds great. Again, Brandon, Penn, thank you again for joining us today. Great project, wonderful work, and a pleasure speaking with you guys today. Look forward to hearing from you again in the future.
Thank you for having us.
All. Yeah.
Aces. If you're a fan of the show, subscribe to our podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or just Google us. And you can also find us on the B&H Explorer website and the B&H Photography Podcast Facebook group. My name is Alan Weitz, and on behalf of John Harris and Jason Tables, thank you so much for tuning in today.